Hey y'all, welcome back to the channel. This is Michael and I have a question for you. Would you spend $1,000 now to save $50,000 later? That is the power of what a survey can do for you when you're buying a property. You think you're just buying a house, but without a survey, you could be buying a lawsuit. Today we're going to go over the 10 ways in which a survey is going to save you thousands and thousands of dollars. As always, if you're liking what you like, go ahead and like and subscribe. We look forward to seeing you on future videos. Let's get started. Reason number one, boundary disputes. I actually had a client that went through this. We went to purchase a property. Fortunately, we had gotten a copy of a survey. The seller, before the current seller, had actually split his lot for an unknown reason. So they had a big backyard, it was all fenced in, and what we found out with the survey was there was about a 10-foot strip of land right up against the neighbor's property. Well, unfortunately, when that seller split the property, he forgot to pay taxes on that 10-foot strip. And with over time, it went into what's called foreclosure, land foreclosure. It goes back to the state and then it gets auctioned out. So my clients were about to buy this property and they found that 10 feet of their property could have potentially is going to be auctioned off. What was really creepy is that when we went to go purchase the property, somebody called us because they actually buy parcels like this from the state so that they can ransom those properties back to the seller. So if they hadn't known it, this guy was going to buy the property $100 or whatever it would have cost at auction from the state. And then he was going to go to my buyers and ransom the property for them for several $1,000s. So there are people out there looking for these opportunities to take advantage of things like this. I think this is kind of like a good analogy. So you want to go ahead and label your food before you put it in the fridge, because if you don't, somebody else might snag it. So this is just a great way to go ahead and label what you own and make sure that it's yours. Okay, reason number two. Do you all know what an easement is? That's okay. You don't need to go too deep, but an easement is basically somebody who has the right to have access to your property. It's usually written into the title. It's something that's publicly recorded. Oftentimes, utility companies will have an easement on your property. Let's say the power company needs to get into your backyard to check out a transformer or something like that. Utility companies typically have access to your property in some way. So if you own a property within city limits, you probably have some type of easement. So this is a really interesting story. There was someone who bought a property. He had a big backyard. He was super excited because all he wanted to do was to build a pool. He did not get a survey. And so when he went to go get plans for the pool, he paid for plans. He was ready to get all the contractors on board. And what he found out was when he went to go get permits from the city, he was unable to dig into the property to fill in a pool space because there was an easement from a sewer company. There's nothing he can do about it. Retroactively, he wasn't able to go back, ask for money from the seller. It's his house now, so it was his problem. Number three, encroachments. It sounds just like what it is. It's somebody's putting their stuff on your property. This often comes up with fence lines. So you may think, hey, the neighbor seems to be putting up a fence and it's on my property. Without a survey, you're not going to know why. But what's really interesting is there's been a lot of lawsuits over fence lines. And what happens is over time, if you do not get a survey, if you do not fight for your land, and the fence line has been there and it has been agreed upon for a certain amount of time, the court could rule in the other property owner's favor. If you don't do it now and you let it be, there are guidelines that will allow the next door neighbor to continue to have their fence where it is because it's been there so long. So make sure you get the survey now so that time doesn't elapse and then you won't be having to go into a huge lawsuit. Okay, number four, illegal or unpermitted structures. So without a survey, you're not necessarily able to tell if the additional structures that are on the property lines have actually been permitted. And that can look like an additional dwelling unit, which is an ADU or a mother-in-law suite, a shop, any structure that the seller has potentially put on the property while they've lived there. If they did not get permits for it, it is not going to show up in the survey, and you are going to know that it's going to become your problem when you close on that property. So if there are additional dwelling units or shops or anything on the property, a survey can be super powerful in saving you a lot of money. Number five, zoning variations. This one is actually really interesting. So in the state of Idaho, where I do real estate, you have setbacks. And what that means is that the city has certain requirements of where your structure can be within the lot. What we see often here is that on the side of your house, you have to have at least 5 feet from the structure to the end of the property line. In the front of the property, it's 15 feet, and in the back, it's 20 feet. Well, there was a buyer who happened to buy a house here in Boise, and he built a deck on the back of his property. It was not a large yard, but he wanted a large deck. So he put a deck all the way out to the back of the property, and what he quickly found out once the neighbors complained, that he was outside of the boundary permit. So he had to tear down a $20,000 deck because he had to have setbacks that he would have known about if he had just gotten a survey. Number 6, this one is great because if you're buying a property, you're probably getting title coverage. What that means is the title company who is helping facilitate your transaction, they're going to give you a policy which will help protect you because they go and research and make sure that there's clear title. That means there's no tax liens, no HOA dues that are unpaid, anything like that that the seller did not pay. And if you buy the property, those become yours. So the title company goes through and they do a policy report, and they'll tell you if there's anything crazy on it. And then additionally, what they'll offer you is a coverage policy, which will then say, after you've bought this property, if something comes up, we will help cover any fees. Well, if you do have a boundary dispute or a zoning variation or any problems like that, if you did not get a survey before you closed, oftentimes that title coverage policy won't take effect without the survey. So to get the most out of that protection, it's super important that you also get a survey. Okay, number 7, and I'm actually seeing this come up a lot more lately. So people will buy a property and they want to renovate or they want to add on to it, whether that's just adding square footage to the existing house or potentially putting in an additional dwelling unit, a mother-in-law suite, something like that. Without a survey, you actually are unable to tell exactly if that is possible. When you go to the city, certain lot sizes will allow certain house sizes, right? So they have a minimum and maximum amount of square footage you can build on depending on the lot size. So we actually had a buyer who wanted to do this, went through with a survey on the property and found out that even though it was a large lot, this specific requirement would not allow him to build onto the back of the house like he wanted to get another 500 square feet. He probably ended up saving like $20,000 in design costs by not purchasing that home because he had gotten a survey. So another really great reason. Okay, number 8, and this one gets a little spicy. I actually live on a shared driveway. Without a survey, you're not going to be able to tell. Imagine buying a property and thinking that you had full access and rights to the driveway, and you found out later, because you didn't get a survey, that your neighbors actually had access to it as well. And there's several complications that go along with that. But something to keep in mind is that let's say you think that the neighbor owns the driveway and you're just driving through it to get to your driveway. But if you have a shared driveway agreement, which would show up in a survey, and something happens to that driveway and it needs repairs or it's cracked or it needs to be relayed or something like that, you could be liable for part of the cost. All right, number 9. This actually happens in Idaho a little bit and maybe some other rural areas. You don't technically, let's say you buy a piece of property, there is no legal rule that that property has to have road access. So you could be thinking, hey, I'm buying a lot. Of course, I'm going to be entitled to having access to the property. You're not. Let's say you buy a property that is landlocked. You could potentially end up having to pay thousands, tens of thousands of dollars to either the city or your neighbor in order to get access. This happened to a client up in northern Idaho. They bought a property that had been split off from a seller, but they didn't have road access. And so in order to get it, they actually bought the lot for maybe it was $100,000 and then ended up having to pay another $15,000 to the seller to get an easement access that was recorded by the state. Okay, number 10, and this is probably my favorite. It's just good sense. Let's say you're buying a property and you get a survey and there's nothing wrong with it. It's so fantastic to have those records because when you go to sell, the properties that have surveys can usually close a few weeks earlier than other properties. And additionally, it can save you a lot of time and headache because you have that information already available. Like a survey is just a really great way to make sure what you're buying is truly yours. Okay, y'all, 10 quick reasons why you should buy a survey. I am happy to go into more details. You can reach out to me, you know how to get a hold of me. But I am so curious, please, in the comments, if you've made it this far, I want to know, would you buy a survey or not? Or have you not in the past and taken that gamble? I just want to know how risky y'all are out there. And while you're at it, when you're leaving a comment, please make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next week for the next video.